How many times have you mixed a song, especially if you're a beat maker, and it just didn't sound right? You know that the individual sounds are good, and it sounded fine when you were playing it in your DAW, but for some reason, once you get done with the song, it just doesn't sound like a cohesive unit, or it doesn't have the warmth that you're looking for. It just sounds different than some of your favorite tracks. So what's the difference between your music and the music from your favorite artists or your favorite producers? Is it the fact that they're using professional equipment? Well, we know that a ton of artists these days make hits from their home studios, and most mixing and mastering is done in the box, so it can't necessarily be that. One potential solution that I could point to is the use of a mix bus, which is something that a lot of new producers don't use. Now, if you're familiar with what mix buses are, then great. You may learn something in this video that may help you in the future. But if you're not familiar with mix buses, I'm going to be going over what they are, how to use them, and why they should be a huge part of your toolbox moving forward, because they make a massive difference. So let's get to it. All right, so as far as definitions are concerned, a bus is simply a channel that an engineer routes sounds to. So for example, if you have, say a kick, a hi-hat, a snare, and some toms, each one of those instruments would be routing their own mixer channel. They should be, at least. But what an engineer could do to make things a little bit easier and give themselves more control, they can take each of those individual channels and they can route them to one specific channel for all of them. And they would name that channel like drums bus. And then you could, use plugins. You could adjust volume. Any plugins that you use would be applied to all of the sounds that are being routed to this channel, as would the volume fader. Right, so it gives, a bit more control. You may have a drums bus, a synth bus, a bass bus, vocals, vocal effects, things of that nature. It's just an easy way to have more control over the sounds that you're mixing. A mix bus is the same concept, with the main difference being that it's the bus that's going to be right before your master track. Right, so the audio is being routed to the mix bus, which is the last place you're able to really make significant changes before it's sent to the master bus. And generally speaking, in DAWs, a master bus will be created for you. So for example, here in FL, it's listed as master, right? However, I like to create this second to last place that audio will go, and I just call it a mix bus. Sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but generally speaking, people refer to it as a master bus and a mix bus. So you might ask, if you have a master bus, why are you using a mix bus as well, right? Couldn't anything that you do on the mix bus just be done on the master? And that's a good question. Yeah, that's the same thing that I asked before I started using one. The main reason, as I mentioned before, is it just gives you more control. For example, I like to use the mix bus to get kind of the vibes that I'm looking for. And then I use the master track or the master bus to boost volume levels for radio or streaming or whatever you're mastering for. So some people do more on the mix bus, some people do less. There is no right answer necessarily. This is just anything with mixing, an additional tool to get you to where you want to be. It's always easier to show rather than tell. So let's just take a look at my mix bus and see what I'm doing with it. So as you can see here, I've got all of my tracks routing to this mix bus, and you can tell here in FL at least by looking at where this little wire is going. So by default, all of these tracks are routing to the master. So what I've done is I've just gone and cut that connection and then right-clicked, and I've clicked route to this track only. So that's how you get it to there. And then as you can see, if you click on the mix bus, that's being routed to the master. That's sort of the chain, as we'd call it. So as I said earlier, I like to use the mix bus for general like vibe plugins, which for the most part, it's going to be like bus compressors. It's going to be saturation plugins. It's going to be EQ. And then once I shoot it over to the master channel, as you can see, I've got like the mastering plugins to bring the volume up. That's kind of how I'm using these things. I like to do it this way because it helps keep me organized, as well as making sure that the track has the sonic qualities that I'm looking for before I send it over to the master to boost the volume. Because if you don't have the sonic qualities right, if you boost the volume, it's not really going to do you any good. The track's still going to sound like garbage. Yeah, and let's take a look at how this works. So what I'll do is I'll deactivate all the plugins that I'm using on these two channels. So you can kind of hear the audio that we're working with, and then I'll go through them to kind of show you how I use these to fill up a track and make it sound more streaming ready. So as you can tell, it's very quiet. You know, when producers make beats, a lot of the times I find that they tend to make the beat or mix the beat as they're making it, and it's too loud to begin with. You have no headroom for whenever it is time to master. So with this song and a lot of songs, I mix really quietly. You know, I give myself a ton of headroom. When it comes to the mix bus, it's only about, maybe a third of the way up. But you don't have to mix this quietly. But as you can tell, it is quiet, right? So we have to do things to bring that volume up. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm using an SSL G Master bus compressor, right? And this plugin does a great job gluing your track together. It allows the track to keep some dynamic range while also making sure that the transients shine through and they're not too squished. So with this SSL, as you can see, I've got it at about a 3 millisecond attack, a little slower than some people like to use, but I find that, I really want my transients to shine through. I don't want it to sound smashed. I've got it at a 10-to-1 ratio, so it's compressing pretty hard. But the thing is with these SSL G Master bus compressors is that a 10-to-1 doesn't sound like a 10-to-1 on other compressors, because what it does is it changes the knee as you raise the ratio. So it's a lot of scientific mumbo jumbo. Just know that these are the settings that I'm using here. The most important thing is, a slightly slower attack is what I recommend. A very long release, because you want this thing to maintain compression over the whole track. And then I use the makeup gain to add some volume. So here is the track with the SSL enabled. Then I'll kind of show you what it sounds like before and after. Disabled. Enabled. And as you can see here, with these bus compressors, you only want like 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction. So you're not really compressing the track really hard. But as you could hear there, well, hopefully you could hear at least, the track is not only louder, which of course it is, but it's starting to fill out, starting to sound more full and dense. And that's what we're shooting for here. So that's the SSL compressor. The next plugin I have here is a J37, which if you're not familiar with J37, it's a tape saturation plugin. Using saturation on the mix bus can be tricky at times, but when you do it correctly, it gives the sound more of an analog feel. And for the most part, just makes it sound less like digital. Sometimes with everything being in the box these days and everything being electronic, sometimes our tracks can just sound too clean. We tend to like and have some nostalgia toward the old analog feel. So what this does is it gives it a bit of that. All right, so I've just got it on the mastering setting here. I've just changed a few settings around. I've lowered the noise level up to saturation. But this is what it sounds like before and after the J37. Before. I'll go ahead and enable it. Slight difference there, right? I'll disable it again. Listen to how it feels more warm and rich. Enabled. Okay. So that's the J37. You can tell just with those first two plugins, it's already sounding louder, richer, warmer, more dense, and that's what we're shooting for. And we're not even close to being done yet. Next, I'm using the F6 EQ by Waves. Using an EQ on your mix bus is a great way to ultimately ruin your master if you don't know what you're doing. So you have to use the EQ with discretion. So a good rule of thumb with EQ on mix and master buses is to have your bands, if you're using a parametric EQ especially, have your bands be wide. You don't want to necessarily employ the surgical, like precision-based EQ that you might on like a vocal track or like a snare drum or something like that on your master. Because what will happen is the more surgical you get with the EQ, the more unnatural it feels. And the more people will be able to listen and tell, hey, they used an EQ, right? You always want these things to be, transparent, and you don't want it to be too obvious for the most part. So what I've done here with this F6, as you can see, is before I used this, the track was sounding a little dull. And I think you'll notice that too with a lot of your mixes, compared to some of your reference tracks that you may be using. It just doesn't have the sharpness to it that you're looking for. So we're doing all these things to boost warmth and density, but we need something to sort of help boost that high end as well. So that's what I've done here at about 4K and here at about 9K. I've made some boosts, and they're about 3 dB, 4 dB tops. Nice wide bands here. I've even taken some of this high end and boosted it just a little bit. I could have used a shelf here, but the shelf was a little too in your face, right? So I did it this way. I've also cut a fair bit. You want to be careful cutting as well, because that can similarly, cause some issues. But I've cut at about 2K because there was some harshness, specifically with the snare at this frequency. So I'll go ahead and play it before and after the EQ, and you'll be able to hear a pretty big difference there, I assume. Here's before. I'll go ahead and enable it. Just a little bit of sharpness. Right, just a little edge, not much. These things build up over time, so you got to be careful not to do too much with any one step. So next, I'm using the Oxford Inflator, which if you've never used this, you need to, right? This plugin is awesome. It's one of my probably top 5 favorite plugins out there that I've used over the years, and it's really hard to say exactly what this plugin is doing. It makes your track sound louder, or it makes whatever channel you're using it on sound louder. But in reality, it's not a limiter. It's not a compressor. If I could explain it as simply as possible, it makes your track sound more dense and heavy, right? So whenever you use this on a mix bus, it can do, it can do you a world of difference. You can make it louder, of course, with the output knob and whatnot. I'm using it fairly heavily here because I wanted to really bring out some of these traits in the track that I was looking for. So I'll play it before and after the Oxford Inflator, and I'll just let you hear the difference rather than telling you exactly what it's doing, because that's generally the better way to show this. So I'll go ahead and play it before and after. I'll just bring it in as I've been doing. Go ahead and enable it. Here's without and with. That's a big difference, right? Mainly in the kick and 808, but it does brings out a little bit of snares, heaviness as well. It's just making the track sound, giving it some oomph. So if you listen to it on like a car stereo or something, it's going to make a big difference between this and without the inflator. So I use it all the time. It's definitely one that I recommend, but yeah, that's how that works. And that pretty much does it for the mix bus in particular, right? I'll play the before and after with all of them, just to let you hear it, and then I'll show you sort of what I do on the mastering bus to help fill things out. But here's the track before, and I'll bring them all in as we're listening to it. Bus compressor. Saturation. EQ. Inflator. Yeah, and that just about does it for the mix bus. You could do more than that if you wanted. You could do less. There is no right answer. It all depends on what you're looking for, what the track sounds like, what traits you're trying to bring out, and what plugins you have available to you to help bring those traits out. For this track, all of these plugins worked really well together. This is a combination that I use quite a bit on mix buses to help bring out that sort of heavy, dense sound that I'm looking for. When it comes down to it, people that are listening to your music don't really know what it is that you've done to it. So, for example, if you're a beat maker and you're trying to sell beats online, most artists don't understand mixing as well as you do. So to them, they don't know what has been done and what hasn't. And if you upload a beat that's not, filled out and mastered, all they hear is whether it sounds big and powerful or not. So if I were to upload this beat with none of those plugins active on like a BeatStars or something, what do you think would happen? Right? No one's going to buy it. So you need to do this in some cases. But if you're just an engineer and you're mixing people's music and mastering it, artists similarly don't know, right? And people that are listening to music don't know. So these are important things to learn, if only for the aesthetic, right? And each of these plugins does a great job of bringing out the aesthetic that I was looking for. So with the master track, what I've done here is, of course, you want to bring up the volume when you're mastering. You want it to be at standard volume for radio or streaming services, things of that nature. That's a given. But what a good mastering engineer does, and granted, I'm not a mastering engineer, but they know how to bring out traits in a track that they're looking for as well. So whatever sonic qualities they want to bring out, if you've done well as a mix engineer, they're able to do well as a mastering engineer to help accentuate those things. So what I've done here is I'm using an L1 from Waves. As you can see, L1 is pretty harsh. You got to be careful with it. You don't want to have too much gain reduction with this, or else it can ruin it. And then I'm using the Abbey Road mastering plugin as well. So let's listen to each of those, and then we'll listen to like the final result of the track and see how much of a difference all these have made. So the L1 does a great job of adding warmth and density to a track as well, while also boosting volume. So I haven't done anything too crazy with the settings here. I'll go ahead and play it before and after, and just kind of let you hear the difference. All right, so this is before. I'll go ahead and bring it in. As you can see here, nothing too crazy. Makes it louder, makes it more warm, more loud. Okay, so that's the L1. Last, I've got the Abbey Road mastering plugin here. I basically have it on this pop mid-side widener setting. I've added a bit of spread to it just to give it that final, big wide touch. I'll play it before and after, and then we'll sort of know what the differences are here. So that's before. I'll bring it in now. So it's a massive difference, isn't it? I mean, you can't even really put into words the difference between before none of those were active and after. And if you're a new producer, you may not kind of know these things. You may not know what to do and how to do it. So that was the goal of me making this video. When it comes down to it, like I said before, this isn't a science, and it never will be a science as much as, these AI mastering companies want to make you think that it is. The main thing is, this is an art form. People like to hear certain qualities in music, right? You want to meet those demands while also staying true to what you were shooting for as an artist or a producer or whatever. So these are the ways that we go about doing that. Of course, like any given plugin here may have, effects on it that, will shape those individual sounds, right? But as a whole, are they coming together as a cohesive unit, right? And that's what these plugins are shooting for. So that'll just about do it. Listen, I appreciate you guys stopping by and watching my videos. I mean, it means a whole lot as this channel's beginning to grow, and I'm starting to see some momentum as far as, return viewers and people leaving comments and all that stuff. So it means a whole lot to me. So if you like the video, feel free to leave a like. If you think you're going to find some value in the channel moving forward and you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe as well. It does a whole lot for the channel. Additionally, if you want to share this with your producer buddies or you want to share this on the forums, that's a massive help to a smaller channel like this. So it's much appreciated on my end. So if you want to see more of me and my music, feel free to check out my website, which is producedbyvargo.com. Producedbyvargo.com. Additionally, I'll have some playlists here on the end screen. So if you want to check some of those out after this, then feel free to do that. I've got some set up for like mixing drums, mixing vocals, stuff like that. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.